Everyone in that lobby thought he was just a security guard, until one whispered his name, and the whole room fell silent. The sun had just slipped behind the skyline of downtown Dallas, painting the glass towers in shades of burnt orange and steel. In the marble lobby of the Whitestone Financial Building, polished shoes clicked across the floor like a ticking clock. The evening gala was in full swing upstairs. Laughter, champagne, deals behind designer smiles. At the far end of the lobby stood a man in a crisp security uniform, navy blue shoulders, squared, eyes steady. He stood like a statue, invisible to the suits passing by. His name tag, read, Michael. Across the room, the elevator doors chimed. Out stepped her. Aubrey Whitestone, CO. Poised, perfect, diamond earrings catching the last light. Her heels echoed across the marble as she approached. Her voice, sharp and low, sliced the air. You're late. Again. Michael didn't flinch. I'm not your secretary, Michael, or your errand boy. I'm your wife, and I deserve better than a man who stands in lobbies while I run empires. The lobby went quiet. He nodded once. Calm. No anger. Just silence that said more than words could. A junior associate nearby shifted awkwardly. Someone coughed. And still, Michael stood tall like a mountain she couldn't move. Then Aubrey turned, heels snapping like thunder as she disappeared back into the elevator. She never looked back. But someone else did. Client. A man who recognized Michael and suddenly paled. Because he knew who Michael really was. Sometimes, the person you overlook is the one who already saved your world. Stay with us. And like, comment, and subscribe to hear what happened next. Before the glimmering lobbies, before the whispered humiliation, before anyone saw him as just the guard, Michael Carson lived a life of quiet purpose. Tucked away in the sleepy edge of Arlington, Texas, Michael's mornings began not with alarm, clocks or meetings but with silence. His little one-story home sat shaded by a pair of oaks that creaked in the early breeze. Each day he woke up at 5 a.m. on the dot. Not because he had to, but because he always had. A habit built from years long gone, still stitched into his bones like muscle memory. He brewed coffee in an old tin percolator that hissed softly on the stove. No fancy gadgets. No social media. Just the scent of strong black coffee, a Bible with frayed edges, and a kitchen window that overlooked a cracked backyard fence and the neighbor's curious cat. His house was modest, worn in all the corners that spoke of life lived. Not decorated, not styled, just kept. The hallway photos told stories nobody ever asked about. A military uniform, once crisp, a woman with tired eyes and a joyful smile, and a little boy, blonde curls, dimples, frozen in time. That boy was gone now. Cancer. 3 years ago. His name was Luke. Michael still set a place for him at the breakfast table on Sunday mornings. Not out of denial, out of respect, out of love. And her. The woman in the photo, her name was Heather. His first wife. His whole world before Aubrey. She died quietly like Luke, only slower. Breast cancer that didn't care how strong she was. And Michael had held her hand the whole way through, never once leaving her side. Not even when it got ugly. He never talked about it. People don't ask security guards about their grief. After losing them both, Michael had vanished from the world for a while. Not in the dramatic way. No spiraling. Just stillness. He sold the second car. Got rid of the suits. Traded corporate conference rooms for midnight shifts at parking garages. Not because he had to, but because he needed to be no one for a while. That's when he found peace in the rhythm. Every morning he ran 2 miles, rain or shine. Not for his body, for his mind. He read a book a week, mostly philosophy or American history. Kept notes in the margins. Asked questions no one would ever answer. He volunteered once a month at a shelter downtown, serving soup with the same quiet focus he gave to everything. He never wore anything flashy, never mentioned his degrees, his medals, or his former title, Lieutenant Commander, U.S. Navy SEAL, retired. That was another life. The man the world saw now, clean-shaven, posture perfect, uniform pressed, was a man. who had already walked through fire and chosen peace. He met Aubrey at a security conference in Houston. She was a speaker, sharp, magnetic, untouchable. He was managing logistics, quiet, grounded, steady. She liked how little he said, how he didn't stare, how he didn't need anything from her. Their relationship moved fast, maybe too fast. She was all ambition, elegance, and drive. He was routine, silence, and stillness. At first, she called it balance. "You're my calm in the storm," she'd say. But somewhere along the way, the storm started seeing the calm as weakness. Michael never fought back with words. He just worked harder, listened longer, loved her through the noise. He didn't mind being in the background. He didn't need praise. He didn't need credit. But it wore on him. Nights when she came home late, tossing her designer bags on the couch without so much as a hello. Mornings when she walked past his coffee like it wasn't there. Dinners eaten alone on opposite ends of the house, her with her laptop, him with his silence. Still, he stayed. Because love, to him, wasn't about what you got. It was about what you gave, even when no one noticed. Especially when no one noticed. But the night in the lobby, something shifted. Not in anger. Not in pride. In clarity. Michael had spent a lifetime doing invisible things that held the world together. Caring, serving, standing in the shadows while others took the light. He never needed to be seen. But maybe it was time to stop letting people mistake kindness for weakness. And so, while the world kept calling him just a guard, they had no idea they were talking to a man who had once led missions that never made the news, who had written strategy reports still classified by the Pentagon, who had held the hand of a dying child without shedding a tear, then sat in the stillness and prayed for another sunrise. Michael Carson had already faced life's deepest loss. He had already found what made a man truly powerful. And soon, so would everyone else. Back in the present, the lobby had settled, but not really. The tension still hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Michael resumed his post by the entrance, posture straight, hands clasped in front, eyes calm but alert, as if nothing had happened, as if the woman who just walked away wasn't his wife, and hadn't just dressed him down like a forgettable employee in front of half the firm. Across the floor, whispers bloomed. "That's her husband? Wait, the Aubrey Whitestone married him? Is it a charity thing? Or a rebound?" Laughter, barely concealed, skipped like stones on water. The gala upstairs was in full swing, but down here, in the polished lobby of Whitestone, Financial's towering headquarters, something colder was spreading. The kind of mockery that wasn't loud. It was casual, confident, unchecked. Because nobody thought he was someone who'd ever speak up. Then he arrived. Nathan Rourke, Senior Vice President. Polished, powerful, slick as an oil spill. The kind of man who wore his success like cologne, strong and too much. He stepped off the elevator like he owned gravity, fixing his cufflinks as he spotted Michael near the entrance. "Well, if it isn't Mr. Whitestone," Nathan smirked, striding over. "Or, do I call you officer? Carson?" Wait. Security specialist sounds better, doesn't it?" Michael didn't flinch. "Evening, Mr. Rourke." Nathan grinned wider. Man of few words. Must be hard keeping up with a woman like Aubrey. She's in rare form tonight. CEO of the year and all. Big clients upstairs. Military guys like you. Ever get nervous in rooms like that? Michael's reply was even, steady. "Rooms don't make me nervous." "Of course not," Nathan said with a chuckle. "You're the strong, silent type. I respect that. Just make sure you don't embarrass her. She's got eyes on a state contract this quarter. Last thing she needs is someone asking why the head of Whitestone married the help." There it was. Not even thinly veiled. A few junior associates nearby stifled uncomfortable laughs. One of them, a young intern named Jason, looked away the way people do when they know something's wrong but don't dare speak up. Michael said nothing, just nodded. He'd heard worse from better men. He'd been insulted by enemies with rifles, not Rolexes. His strength didn't rise when challenged. It was already there. Nathan, frustrated by the lack of reaction, leaned in slightly. Let me guess. You were a grunt, right? Infantry? I knew a few guys like you. Real loyal types. But loyalty doesn't pay the bills, man. Doesn't impress clients. Let's be honest, Aubrey pities. You. Michael's eyes lifted just barely. I was Navy, he said quietly. Nathan raised his eyebrows. SEALs. Michael held his gaze. Class 223. 6 tours. Retired at 38. Nathan blinked. The grin faded, just for a moment. The room paused like even the marble. Floors were listening now. Before Nathan could speak, the elevator doors behind him opened again. Aubrey stepped out, mid-conversation with a city commissioner, laughing, commanding the air around her. But she froze when she saw Nathan and Michael standing so close. Her smile faltered just for a second before she quickly regained it. She walked over with a wine glass and placed her hand on Nathan's arm. Not Michael's. Everything all right here? She asked, eyes flicking between them. Nathan straightened. Oh, just complimenting your husband. Didn't know he was one of those Navy guys. Impressive stuff. Aubrey gave a tight, polished smile. Michael doesn't like to talk about that. Michael nodded once. She's right. Modest too, Nathan added, forcing a laugh. Man's a unicorn. He turned and walked off, disappearing into the gala upstairs. Aubrey stayed behind, facing her husband now, wine glass trembling just slightly in her hand. Could you not make a scene, please? She whispered. Not tonight. Michael looked at her, not with anger, with something deeper, a kind of quiet heartbreak. I didn't say a word, he replied. She didn't respond, just turned, heels clicking against the marble once more. Michael stood alone again, not shaken, not rattled, just present, like a soldier who'd walked this kind of battlefield before, not with bullets but with silence, with judgment, with people who mistook their spotlight for importance. The tension hadn't broken, it had thickened, and somewhere upstairs, the truth was getting ready to rise. The ballroom shimmered with elegance. Chandeliers dripping in light, strings playing in the corner, waitstaff gliding like shadows between guests. Whitestone Financial's annual gala was where deals were sealed with smiles and futures changed over filet mignon. And at the center of it all stood Aubrey Whitestone, draped in midnight blue satin, laughing beside the deputy mayor and 3 senior investors from a Fortune 500 firm. Tonight was hers. Until the screen behind her flickered. A tech assistant near the AV station hesitated, tapping a few keys. Then the music stopped. Aubrey's eyes narrowed, and on the massive projector screen behind her, a logo appeared, not Whitestone's. The U.S. Department of Defense. A beat later, another symbol joined it. Naval Special Warfare. Command. Murmurs spread. Heads turned. What the hell? Aubrey whispered. Then a voice came from the back. I'm sorry to interrupt. Every head turned. Michael. Not in his uniform. He stood now in a simple black suit. Tailored, understated, and clean. No tie. Just presence. Calm, grounded presence. Like he had nothing to prove, and yet, everything to share. Aubrey's face flushed. Michael, what are you doing? But the screen changed again. Images now. Black and white photos. Surveillance stills. A young Michael, desert fatigues, arms outstretched, leading a team across rooftops in Kandahar. Another in scuba gear surfacing near a hostile port in the middle of the night. A news headline flashed briefly. Hostage rescue in Syria credited to unnamed SEAL team. Then a final slide. Lieutenant Commander Michael Carson. Retired with honors, 13 distinguished. Commendations. Gasps. Not dramatic. Just sharp intakes of breath from people who realized the man they'd dismissed had once walked into hell so they could drink champagne in peace. Michael didn't flinch. He didn't soak it in. He just spoke. 4 years ago, I stepped away from the military after 21 years of service. Not because I had to, because I'd seen enough. Enough war. Enough loss. Enough of what people think strength looks like. He paused, letting the silence settle. I didn't want a title. I wanted peace. I wanted to build a life with someone who didn't need to know who I was to love me for who I am. Aubrey's hand trembled on the stem of her wine glass. Her mouth parted slightly, but nothing came out. Michael continued, voice steady. I didn't share my past because I didn't need validation. I wore a uniform for 2 decades. I held dying brothers in my arms. I led missions no one will ever know about. Not because I was the best, but because I could stay calm when it mattered. He looked around the room, scanning the stunned faces. Nathan, wide-eyed and flushed. The mayor, mouth slightly open. Even the investors, all now shifting their weight uncomfortably. All I've ever wanted, Michael said, was to live with integrity. That means doing the right thing even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. Then his eyes found Aubrey's. Not cold, not bitter, just clear. But tonight, he said softly, I realized that silence isn't always noble. Sometimes silence lets others rewrite your story. He turned slightly, preparing to walk away, then paused. I'm not embarrassed to be your husband, Aubrey. I never was. But you were embarrassed of me. Not because I did anything wrong, but because you didn't know who I really was. The crowd stood still, like the air had thickened and no one dared breathe. Aubrey opened her mouth. Michael! But she didn't finish. Not because he stopped her. Because she didn't know what to say. The man she had belittled in marble lobbies had once briefed presidents, had pulled teammates from burning wreckage, had stared down death not with rage, but with purpose. And she had mistaken stillness for smallness. A slow clap echoed through the room. From the back, the client, the one who had recognized Michael in the lobby, a defense contractor, gray hair, square jaw, eyes misting as he stepped forward. Lieutenant Commander Carson, he said, voice thick. You saved 6 of my men in 08. I never got to say thank you. Michael nodded respectfully. They saved me too, sir. Now the room moved. People whispered to each other, but not with gossip. With reverence. Heads turned. Eyes watched him now not as a nobody, but as a man whose story had been hiding in plain sight. And Michael? He just walked toward the exit. No victory lap. No applause needed. He passed Nathan, whose eyes now dropped to the floor, and gave him a single pat on the shoulder. Not harsh. Not mocking. Just understanding. Then he passed Aubrey. She reached for his hand. Michael, I didn't know. He paused. I know. And then gently he let go. Not out of anger, but because a man like Michael Carson knew, true power isn't about being seen. It's about knowing who you are even when no one else does. The music didn't return right away. The ballroom, so alive just minutes earlier, had gone strangely still. People stood in quiet. Clusters like kids after a fire drill, unsure what came next. The glittering elegance had lost its edge. No one was laughing now. No one was sipping wine just for show. They were watching the door. Watching him. Michael Carson had just walked out. And for the first time all night, no one followed Aubrey. They followed him with their eyes, their thoughts, their silence. Even the chandeliers seemed to dim. Aubrey stood frozen, still clutching her wine glass like it could anchor her to something real. Her cheeks, once warmed with pride and praise, were now flushed for a different reason. She wasn't the center anymore. She didn't feel powerful. She felt small. Nathan Rourke stepped quietly beside her, not meeting her gaze. I didn't know, he said, voice barely audible. She didn't answer. Look, he tried again, eyes scanning the room for a graceful exit. I was just making conversation. I didn't mean anything. Yes, you did, Aubrey whispered. And for once, Nathan didn't have a comeback. He straightened his tie and quietly walked away. From the corner of the ballroom, Jason, the young intern who had overheard everything earlier, glanced around before slipping out the door. Downstairs, Michael stood near the security desk, adjusting his jacket as if nothing had changed, like he hadn't just unspooled his entire past in front of 100 strangers. He wasn't angry. He wasn't glowing. He was just calm. Jason approached him slowly, nervous. "Sir." Michael turned. "Yeah. I'm sorry for the way they talked to you up there." Michael studied the young man. "You didn't say anything cruel." "No, but I didn't say anything at all," Jason replied, lowering his eyes. "I should've." Michael offered a small nod. "Sometimes the best thing we can do is learn from the moment." Jason hesitated. Then, "Is it true? Everything you said? All that stuff on the screen?" Michael gave a faint smile. "I never said anything. They did." Jason nodded. Do you think you could talk to our leadership group sometime? I think a lot of us could use someone who's real. Someone who's actually done something." Michael considered that, then gently patted the young man's shoulder. "We'll talk." As Jason left, others began drifting downstairs too. Slowly, quietly, like approaching something sacred. The defense contractor was the first to reach him again. The man extended his hand, not out of duty, but reverence. "I wasn't sure if it was really you, but I remember that mission in '08. You're the reason my son got to grow up with a father." Michael clasped his hand with strength and humility. "I didn't do it alone." Another guest stepped up. Then two more. No speeches. No fanfare. Just quiet moments of respect. Earned, not requested. One woman, a city planner, handed Michael her card. "I always thought leadership meant being the loudest voice in the room," she said softly. "But I saw more strength in you tonight than I've ever seen in a mayor." Michael simply nodded. Leadership's quieter than people think. Across the lobby, the commissioner from earlier, who had been laughing with Aubrey at the start of the night, watched everything unfold, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Then he turned to his assistant. "Make sure he's invited to our next Veterans Roundtable. I don't care what his job title says." Back upstairs, the gala sputtered back to life, but differently. The laughter, when it returned, was softer. The conversations had weight. And Aubrey? She stayed in the hallway just outside the ballroom, away from the lights, away from the investors, staring down at her phone. She scrolled through a photo album, one she hadn't looked at in a while. There was Michael from their early days, smiling beside her in a white t-shirt, arms around her, barbecue smoke in the background. Not a trace of uniform, just a man who showed up day after day for everyone but himself. Her thumb hovered, then stopped on a photo she'd never paid much attention to. A candid one. Michael was holding the door open for an elderly neighbor, groceries in her arms, while a toddler waved from the sidewalk. That's who he is, she thought. Not the title, not the silence. The man who holds the door open when no one's watching. She walked toward the elevator, not to chase him, not yet, but maybe to listen, to remember. And Michael? He returned to his post by the front doors. Not because he had to, but because he'd made a commitment. And when people walked past him now, they didn't see just a guard. They saw a man who had walked through fire and chose peace. A man who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. A man who stood still and made the world stop. 3 weeks later, the lobby looked the same. Same polished marble floors. Same glass doors. Same early morning sunlight stretching long. And gold through the windows. But something had changed. People nodded now when they passed Michael Carson at the entrance. Not in the stiff, dismissive way people acknowledge security, but with real recognition, the kind that lingers a second longer, with the quiet respect of someone who knows they're in the presence of someone steady, someone real. Michael still wore the uniform, still arrived early, still walked the perimeter twice before shift change. But now, a small brass placard had been installed on the wall near the front desk. Read, "In honor of Lieutenant Commander Michael Carson, for quiet leadership in times of great noise." Most people didn't know who had put it there. Michael didn't ask. But he had an idea. Inside the building, things felt different. HR had begun reviewing its leadership development program. Jason, the intern, had submitted a proposal for a speaker series featuring veterans, first responders, and other non-traditional voices. The proposal had gone viral inside the company Slack. And Michael? He'd been asked to lead the first session. It wasn't in a grand hall, just a mid-sized conference room on the 12th floor. No stage, no spotlight, just a whiteboard, a circle of chairs, and a group of 30 employees. Some in suits, others in hoodies, notebooks on their laps. Michael stood at the front with a dry erase marker and a calm voice. He didn't talk about war. He talked about pressure, about listening, about doing the right thing when no one else would. No, if you didn't. Leadership, he said, writing the word in block letters, is how you carry the quiet moments, not the loud ones. He let the silence settle. You don't need rank to serve. You don't need a title to lead. You just need clarity and the discipline to show up when it matters. When he finished, there were no cheers, just stillness, nods, real understanding. Afterward, a young woman approached him with tears in her eyes. I've been trying to get. Michael smiled gently. Sometimes, stillness tells us what ambition never will. A few weeks later, the city council reached out. The commissioner from the gala had sent Michael's name forward. They were forming a new advisory board, a leadership panel to mentor young public servants and create programs for underrepresented veterans. They wanted Michael to chair it. He didn't say yes right away. He didn't chase positions. He took a walk first, down by the Trinity River, where the reeds bowed low in the breeze and ducks slid quiet across the water. It was where he used to go with Luke on Saturdays. Just the two of them, paper boats, laughter echoing against the trees. Michael sat on a bench and pulled a folded photo from his wallet. Luke in a cowboy hat too big for his head. Heather smiling behind him. They were gone, but not really. Still with him. Always in the stillness. When he finally stood and made the call to accept the role, his voice was clear. Strong. A new mission, not with gear or weapons, but with wisdom, with presence. And Aubrey? She didn't ask for him back. She knew better than to believe words could fix what time and silence had revealed. But she came to his first public session, sat in the back, no heels, no designer bag, just jeans and a notebook. She stayed for the whole thing. Afterward, she didn't speak. She just placed a hand on his shoulder as she passed. It lingered. For a second, soft, heavy, healing. He didn't look back. He didn't need to, because forgiveness doesn't always come wrapped in reconciliation. Sometimes it's just two people finally seeing each other clearly and letting go. That night, Michael walked home under a pink and orange Texas sky. The wind brushed gently against his sleeves, and the cicadas were humming in the distance. As he passed his old oak trees, he paused. There, on his porch, sat a package. Inside was a single framed quote, etched in wood. No note, just this: true power is never loud. He placed it on his mantle next to Luke's baseball glove and Heather's favorite candle. The quiet things, the real things. And as he sat in his chair with a cup of coffee, the house breathed around him. Full of peace, full of memory. Michael Carson hadn't become someone new. He had simply allowed the world to see who he'd always been. Some people build empires. Others hold them up quietly, without applause. And when the noise fades, it's the steady ones we remember. Because true leadership doesn't shine. It endures. Have you ever felt unseen, even while standing right in front of everyone? Like your quiet efforts, your steady presence, your loyalty, all went unnoticed? Michael Carson's story is a reminder that power doesn't always speak loudly. Sometimes it just stands quietly doing the right thing day after day until the world finally notices. Maybe you've been that person. Maybe you are that person. And if so, we want you to know something. You're not invisible. Your presence matters. Your patience matters. Your quiet strength might just be changing lives in ways you'll never fully see. So tell us, when was a time you were underestimated? What have you carried in silence that others don't know about? We'd love to hear your story in the comments. Share it with someone who needs to hear this today. And if this story moved you, subscribe for more. We're here to tell the stories that don't always make headlines but make a difference. Because not all heroes wear suits. Some wear silence. And some stand guard. Thank you for watching. Take care of each other. And remember, stillness is a kind of strength.